Welcome back as we broadcast live from SEC Media Days in Dallas, Texas. Still doesn't sound right. Mike Griffith, the Dog Nation, joins us. Are we in Dallas?
We've been here before, haven't we? I think we did this once before.
Oh, yeah, there was a Cotton Bowl or two.
There's no video of that. Thank goodness.
Video of that. Oh, that's golden stuff. I'd forgotten all about that.
I probably shouldn't have reminded you.
No, sometimes you go to SEC Media Days and you're just like, what city am I in?
Right.
But we've seen Oklahoma and Texas, and we've visited with their media, and I'm just wondering, as big as they are, do they understand what they're getting into?
Not really. No,
I don't think they do.
No, not really. You know, they still think they're a big deal. And listen, they are, but relative to other programs in the league, and not really. I think they need to earn their stripes, and I'm not sure Oklahoma will. I mean, it's a 500 program maybe in the league. I'm thinking they're getting outbid for players by Missouri now. And Texas, I mean, they've come in with a Texas-sized ego. I mean, just when you thought the Florida Gators had lost their swag, somebody comes in that talks as much, that hasn't done as much. And so it's going to be really interesting to me to see how Texas handles this week-to-week challenge in the SEC. All the pressure they're putting on themselves, Dave.
Tennessee doesn't. Their head coach, Josh Heupel, doesn't say as much.
No.
Where does he rank among, by design, most boring coaches out there?
You know, I don't find Josh boring. I like to read between the lines, and I like to evaluate him on his teams. And he's got a quiet swag to him.
He does.
I mean, he's a dude. This guy won a national title. He's a Heisman Trophy runner-up.
And he's wearing Nikes with a suit.
I like Heupel. I like his game. I think he's a fantastic fit for the University of Tennessee because I thought Philip Fulmer was a little bit like that too. You know, a little bit of that offensive line, a lot of confidence. I don't want to say smug, but Philip knew that he had a lot of talent. I think Josh knows he's going to put a lot of points on the board. And this year, I think the defense at Tennessee, Dave, is going to have a stinger.
I got the feeling from listening, I know you're in the media room a lot. I got the feeling from listening to Josh Heupel, he likes the secondary more than most of us outside the program.
Well, sure. And this is a team that's grown together and gotten better. You know, because early on it was all about the offense, right? Now I've seen this defense take steps, and I don't think people really recognize just how far along Tennessee's come. Not just on the front, but to your point, in secondary as well. And if you've got a premium pass rusher, that makes all the difference in the world for those young corners and safety. I expect Tennessee to be a contender this year. I think they're going to upset a couple teams that maybe people don't see coming.
Mike with Dog Nation, he covers the University of Georgia.
Yeah.
I would assume that none of the Georgia players were allowed to drive the bus to SEC Media Days. Would that be that? Because there's, I mean, you know, things have happened down there. I wouldn't want anybody to get in trouble.
Well documented. You know, one of the more groundbreaking stories that I thought came out of here, though, because the big question was, what are they going to do about this? Right? It's however many in the last 2 years. Obviously, a well-documented tragedy a couple of years ago. What is Kirby going to do about this? Are they looking the other way? Are they going to talk? And the answer is no. They've done what they can with proactive education. They've done what they can with bringing in Georgia State troopers, local police. You know, Kirby's made a lot of people run stadium steps. Guys have been suspended for games. The next step was fines, Dave. And it's interesting to me because just a couple of years ago it was all about the NIL and these players need this money and they're so deserving. And now that these unintended consequences have arrived, we have these new world problems, right? So we need new world solutions. And if you're going to treat these guys like NFL players by paying them, then you have to penalize them and hold them accountable like NFL players get held accountable. And they're hitting them in the walls. Now, will this be a trend, Dave, or do you think, and you've covered recruiting, or is this something that programs are going to use against Georgia?
I actually think they'll use it against them. I think it's a smart move. I love it. I'm willing to shake Kirby Smart's hand for it. But I think it'll be used against him in recruiting.
It's something that he has to do because it will also be used against him if they continue to have off-field issues that put the general public at risk.
But I will tell you this, if my son comes to me and says, I got this school that's going to find me if I get in trouble driving a car, that's where I want him to go. I want him to go where there are consequences.
But who's making the decision, you or him?
Well, that's very true. Hopefully I have a say in the matter. So, Mike, give me the teams out of the SEC that can realistically win the national championship this year.
Wow. Georgia, Texas. That's it. I'm not buying Ole Miss. I'm not drinking that Kool-Aid.
You're not buying Alabama with that Saban talent still and a new look?
Some Saban talent, maybe not the depth. And
no.
When you open things up like I feel like Kalen DeBoer's doing, and there's a possibility. I suppose you leave that potential open, but I feel like the feel good coach, happy coach thing only goes so far. At some point, I think you got to have guardrails, and I'm not exactly sure if I think that Jalen Milroe can be consistent. Now I say that having watched Jalen Milroe outplay Carson Beck in the SEC title game. I also say that having watched Jalen Milroe run the wrong play when the season was on the line. So I do think he's going to be improved. I'm not sure the receiver talent. They no longer have Jermaine Burton or A.D. Mitchell. I'm not sure and neither did Isaiah Bond transferred to Texas. So I'm not sure that he has the supporting cast offensively to do the things that he needs to do, and he may be running a little bit more. So I'm a little skeptical of Alabama. While I think they're dangerous, and while I think Kalen DeBoer is a great coach, and I think we'll see some big numbers from Jalen Milroe, I don't know that we'll see the level of consistency that we saw under typical Nick Saban teams.
Mike Griffith, Dog Nation, live from SEC Media Days in Dallas. Still sounds wrong. More after this off the Oak Sports.
So there's Mike, and he says that Tennessee is a contender this year. He means contender to make the college football playoff. I don't know that he means contender to win a national championship. I don't want to put words in his mouth. The question I have for you is the NFL is pretty simple, right? If you don't make the playoffs, you've had a failure of a season. If you make the playoffs, you're kind of pretty okay. I mean, it depends on expectations and what you had, and I get that, and there can be sidebar stories and all of that. Will college football be that simple, where if you don't make the college football playoff and you're an elite program, you have fallen short of goal? Or will we justify from year to year and say, oh, this is why Alabama didn't make it or Georgia didn't make it? Because when you talk about 12 teams, Caleb, there's a lot of opportunities.
Yeah. See, I don't know how they're going to look at this because football, with basketball, Dave, just to bring it to college basketball, when Mike Krzyzewski was at Duke, if they didn't win a national title, people weren't out there saying, oh, that's a total disappointment. They didn't win a national title, because people understood in an NCAA tournament that you have to win 6 games. In college basketball with 40-minute games and a tip-off, I mean, anything can happen in 1 week. But in the NFL, I think people sometimes give a break because there's so much parity in the NFL. I mean, we know this. Tom Brady lost plenty of times to way lesser teams at home in the playoffs. That happened a lot. He lost to Joe Flacco at home in the AFC title game in 2013. Joe Flacco beat Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. Okay. But we understand the NFL is so designed by parity. College football, parity is not the name of the game in college football. There are better teams and there are worse teams. Football as a sport is not like basketball, where in a one-game setting, the better team is almost still always going to win in football. So I don't think that teams are going to – I don't think it's going to be as easy to give coaches and teams a pass if they lose games in the college football playoff, if they lose early when they have a top 4 team in talent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can roll with that. My question, too, to take it the next step, is how far away are we from a coach getting fired after making the playoffs? Will there be a coach out there that he manages to get into the playoffs just barely, but he's had a horrible season, expectations are high? I mean, let's face it, if you're an Ohio State or an Alabama or Georgia or what Tennessee can soon become, you are expecting year in and year out to compete for championships, not just compete for a top 12 finish. So I wonder how far we are from that, because there have been coaches. Well, I mean, if you want to look to the NBA, I mean, there have been coaches that have lost their job 1 year after winning a championship, for goodness sake.
Not just the NBA, the NFL did that too. You know that, Dave. You're a Cowboy fan. You know that better than anybody. I would say
that was a lot. Yeah, there's a lot to that.
Yes, there was. I would argue that it kind of depends. Funny enough, John Calipari, of all people, lost his job after making the playoffs with the New Jersey Nets. And that's because they got swept by the Bulls in the Jordan era. I think you might end up seeing – I do think you're going to end up seeing that, but I don't think any coach would ever get fired during the playoff. I don't. I think they would get fired maybe after making the playoff, but I don't think they would get fired during the playoff. I don't think that's ever.
No, not during. After.
That would be hilarious.
Could somebody eke in, get beat 49-3, and be fired after?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, coaches get fired after making the NCAA tournament all the time in basketball, so absolutely they could. And so it's I think that's definitely possibly going to happen. And so I think coaches can now lower level coaches, no, coaches like the ones that, let's be honest, Dave, there's going to be a group of 5 team make the playoff every year. And that's like those smaller conference schools that make the NCAA tournament. That is their equivalent of a national championship, isn't it? Like, hey, remember that year we made the college football playoff? And I think that's fine. I think there's nothing wrong with that. That actually helps make the sport more fun for everybody. There's tiers. Those schools aren't going to win the national title, but hey, what's wrong with getting in and maybe getting blown out every year 50-0 by Georgia? Those coaches won't get fired.
I guess not. Yeah, you shouldn't ever get fired for making the playoff. Now, I will say this. I think they're one expansion away from it being a real thing. If it's a 16-team playoff at one point, or if it's even more, then I think that could be a possibility, but not at 12.